What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and we just got a bombshell of an article once again from The Athletic, and this was put out by a combination of Zach Rosenblatt, Diana Rossini, and Michael Silver in regards to Woody Johnson. And not only does the timing suck ahead of our GM and head coach search, but I was just getting excited about having guys like Thomas Dimitroff get interviewed, the interest in a guy like Mike Vrabel, but still just the general head coaching pool. And all of that gets sapped out when you go through an article like this that, again, maybe some of this stuff is refutable, but it was pretty detailed. There were responses from spokespersons that were included. The big ticker is, according to the trio that crafted the article, they polled, interviewed, etc., more than 20 people within the organization, a lot of those being players, high-ranking executive members, etc. And it feels like an indictment of everything Jets fans have been saying for the longest. I know I don't hear from as many of you that often, but for the older generation of Jets fans, right, 40, 50 plus, many of you generally comment throughout some of the videos that I'll drop stating, the Jets will never get this resolved. This is a Woody Johnson issue, etc., etc. And this 100% feels like this. And so all of the positive feelings, all of the good vibes I had going into the offseason, trying to stay half glass full approach, this article really sapped a lot of that away. There's a lot to break down, so let's kind of go through this and dive into some of the highlights here. For starters, the Jerry Jeudy trade. Now, this is one that I don't mind as much, but the root cause behind it is the problem, right? Joe Douglas at the time would have severely overpaid. Jerry Jeudy went for a 5th and a 6th round pick, I believe. Joe Douglas was going to offer a 2nd round pick and Alan Lazard to bring in Jerry Jeudy. That's not that crazy to me, considering the New York Jets were kind of accustomed to there being a tax, right? A tax in retaining players, a tax in acquiring players, a tax in trading for players. But in this whole situation, Woody Johnson apparently vetoed this trade on the merits that Jerry Jeudy's overall Madden rating wasn't sufficient enough for this to be possible, which, by the way, it quotes this in the article as well. At the time, for Madden 24, Jerry Jeudy was an 83 overall. For comparison's sake, Garrett Wilson was an 84 overall. And that's not even the craziest part, is that the owner made a decision based on a video game. The crazy part is that it goes on to mention that his sons, Jack and Brick, they, being youthful, right, it mentions over the portion of time where he first went and served his ambassadorship to now, they've gone from being 11 and something to being teens. It goes on to mention that these little guys are included and involved in meetings, and some of their opinions, some of the things that they may read on the internet actually get translated and have a huge impact on decisions that are being made within the organization, which is absolutely insane to me. Now, I've been in corporate settings where kids may be with, a CEO, a VP, something like that, but obviously they're just there so that they can, wrap up the meeting and then get to whatever they're doing after the fact of work. In this case, they are actively having a hand in disrupting the flow of the New York Jets, the power structure, the decisions being made by the football guys that you hired that, you have quote unquote confidence in here. So it's insane to me to see that is one of the the main drivers of really what's impacting a lot of what happened throughout the article. Woody Johnson is listening and taking heed to people that have no business being involved in these football decisions. The family, the media at large, even us as fans, I would argue, we shouldn't be impacting what's happening from a Joe Douglas or Robert Saleh perspective, the likes of Chad Alexander, etc., that they would have had as the right-hand man, for example, to Joe Douglas. Makes zero sense. More to it as well. There was the rumors, of course, that Woody Johnson was considering benching Aaron Rodgers that they cite in the article. It goes on to mention that those comments were made more so to gauge the reaction amongst the room, which feels like a Woody Johnson thing after reading a lot of this stuff, right? It feels like he throws flyers or feelers out there, and if people are responding the way that he deems is the correct answer in his mind, then he'll roll with that. And if not, then there's a rift, right? There's an uncomfortable feeling where if you can't argue a valid point to change his mind, it's just not going to happen. Going back to the teenage sons being involved in the meetings, apparently this has been going on for quite some time. They mention not only just random articles and stuff they may bring up, stat little imageries that may pop up, but I seen Jets X Factor, shout out to them, get cited as a media outlet, for example, that may be brought up in these meetings and discussed, which I'm perfectly fine with Jets X Factor, right? I think that's a valid argument. Strong stuff that they have out there, reasons, solid foundations for a lot of what they put. But still, ultimately, the fact that they're pushing a lot of this stuff, knowing how Woody Johnson is, again, it's just a huge disruptor. If you're coming in, say we hire Thomas Dimitroff now, or say you're Thomas Dimitroff, you've already had your interview, you're feeling good about it, you think you can put a plan in place to get things on the right track for the New York Jets, and then you see this article, do you not start bowing out now? Do you not start looking for these signs if you come back for a second interview and you're looking around and you see that he has his sons in the meetings, even if they're not speaking up or anything, and you start looking for a lot of these cues, a lot of these issues? It's problematic for everybody. There's also this weird piece in there about him forcing people, or at least according to the spokesperson or something along those lines, that he's forcing people to refer to him as Mr. Ambassador after his first attempt. And that I guess there's a little bit of a pain point that he wasn't reappointed by Trump during this second go around, and still hasn't had any kind of indication on if he'd actually pick up a role in office, which according to them is a huge surprise. But one of the sentiments throughout this article that you'll pick up on is that there is a lack of accountability. We've said this before, but we're always talking about it from the standpoint of coach the players. With Woody Johnson really being the grown adult child that he is, which is the feeling I get walking away from this, paying attention to all the comments that I've heard about over the years, they did a good job of specifically mentioning that when these decisions are being made, when Woody Johnson's throwing these opinions out, when he's instinctually acting in certain moments that occur throughout the course of a regular season or an off season, that when Woody Johnson is in the wrong, there's really nobody to let him know, hey, this didn't work out. Here's why we won't make the move again. And here's what we have in place to make sure that we don't even have to get to this point once again. There's nobody there that's able to do that. There's a lot of points, a lot of quotes, a lot of references to the fact that high-ranking members within the Jets organization have to tiptoe around any perceivable problems that they identify, any gaps in processes, any particular areas of improvement that can be identified, and they have to kind of give like a compliment sandwich, if you will, right? And let them know, hey, here's what we're loving. By the way, I think we can do this drastically different to improve things, but you're doing this, and this well, right? And that's a killer. Again, if this was a simple situation where you can say Woody Johnson is screwed up year after year after year, but you slowly seen him back off, you slowly seen him shift perspective to letting guys make decisions before stepping in, that hasn't been the case here. And so, again, root cause, if Woody Johnson is going to continue to have these same kind of actions, it doesn't matter who we're hiring whatsoever. In fact, there's a specific quote in here that mentions it feels completely different with the Jets. It's the most dysfunctional place imaginable. That isn't as damning of itself, because we've heard this from Jets content creators, we've heard it from media members, Jets beat writers, we've heard it from the media outlets like Jets X Factor, we've heard it from former employees in front office and coaching staff about the dysfunctionality, I guess, within the organization. But it's still insane to me. To see the amount of evidence, to see the amount of detail, to see the amount of situations within the small sample size of a couple years pulled out within this article is insane. One of the other pieces, and I think this is things that will scare away, again, some of the potential front office and head coach members that we can get, openly discrediting staff, players, and decisions, and not only just discrediting them, outright disrespecting them in many situations. There was a couple different examples pointed out here, but I think one of the most oblivious ones, or the most obvious ones, is the Mike White situation. They quoted the game against the Seahawks where he got his ribs broken, and during the loss, goes in the locker room and tells them, I guess Mike White throws his helmet and he tells them, you fucking suck. And that has to be a different level of insane. Imagine being in a $1 billion corporation, taking over the reins from the star-studded number 2 overall pick in Zach Wilson, doing a better job, even though you're quite inexperienced yourself, and then hearing from ownership while you have the support of essentially every other person within the organization that you suck. And then we go on to see him go to the rival Dolphins, and it is what it is. But things like that just can't fly. This is one of those situations where I would demand that the NFLPA and the NFL in and of itself, they need to go in and take a look at these situations and decide, is this enough? Does this warrant enough of a conversation to where you force Woody Johnson out as a owner in the NFL, right? This isn't only just damaging to the New York Jets. This could be a situation where it's extremely damning and damaging to the NFL at large, right? And for, again, a corporation in and of itself, that's the focus obviously is a fun product, but to make money. I know the New York Jets have, 10x, whatever the evaluation is since Woody Johnson bought the team, and we've done nothing for that to be, worth the case. Imagine what the Jets would be worth if we were actually winning, we were making the playoffs consistently, having any kind of level of high-level success, right? There's other parts that's mentioned in here, right? Joe Douglas specifically quoting that he answers to a teenager in regards to the kids being out. And I can imagine not only is it frustrating that you have a plan in place that you have to try to prove is correct to your owner, and that in and of itself wouldn't necessarily be a problem to me, especially if things haven't been going right. But to imagine that at the drop of any dime, any little article, any little image, any GIF or something that's seen by these little kids, it's going to take time and energy away from you being able to focus on what you want to, because now you have to jingle the keys in front of Woody Johnson and get him to focus back on what you want, or disprove why these kids that know nothing about a NFL operation are wrong. You have the Saleh firing, and I know there's been a lot of back and forth in terms of the articles and remarks that we've seen on that, but it goes on to mention that it feels like Saleh was going to make the change, demote Nathaniel Hackett, move to Todd Downing. That was kind of the cherry on top, especially after losing the international game that forced Woody Johnson's hand to firing Robert Saleh. And this is after, I believe, they forced the all gas, no brakes model to be taken off of the building and replaced with, I think it was Love and Respect or something along those lines. Love and Glory, something like that, which also didn't go back up on the wall. So it felt like they were preparing to fire Robert Saleh for some time, and Woody Johnson was just looking for that last little bit to push it over the top. There's bits about Woody Johnson refusing to replace the key members within Joe Douglas's hierarchy. Chad Alexander, Rex Hogan, affectionately referred to as the left and right hand for him. And the spokespeople go on to mention that the jobs were replaced by employees within, rightful promotions, etc., etc. All of that just kind of felt like BS. Overall, it's the same effect that you get by following Robert Saleh, where Jeff Ulbrich is now taking on a ton of that responsibility. And this Ulbrich being different because he had the option to hand over those responsibilities, I would assume. But same situation, right? Now all of the things that would have been dispersed among 3 people is being picked up by 1 and or guys that haven't done that work before. So you would expect there to be a learning curve there. Training camp officials, right? We talked a ton about all of the penalties that we see week after week after week. And Robert Saleh may have been trying to cover for Woody Johnson this whole time. We know that we got them twice during joint practices, but outside of that, according to this article, Woody Johnson didn't want to pay to have the NFL officials at training camp, which is the common practice throughout the NFL. There's also 2 final points here. One, going back to the lack of accountability for Woody Johnson himself. There's a group that comes out referenced as the Bobs from the front office. Apparently these are guys from his investment group, part of the ownership, I would assume, to some degree, that I guess just kind of hang out throughout the organization, observing, taking notes. It kind of feels like ear hustlers, right? Guys that are trying to keep their ear to the streets and get a feel for what the employees are not openly saying out loud, right? And there's quotes that go on to mention that it ends up being, a situation where people are tiptoeing. They feel like any little thing they say that sounds like criticism may end up striking the ire of Woody Johnson or causing a series of events in motion that would end up just blowing things out of proportion, right? And then this Chris versus Woody kind of dissension, I guess, where we're talking about all the things that are wrong with Woody Johnson and how he's run this operation. But with Chris, it mentions the fact that he's very laid back. I do believe there's a point where they mention he does pay attention a little bit to the media where he's drawing opinions and stuff from them, but largely he's in the background. He's letting the people that he hired make decisions, and it felt like people were strongly hoping that Woody Johnson did get reappointed so that Chris would be back in place. The people can try to make a 3-year run or so, if you will, with the new regime in place. And all will be right in the world, at least until Woody Johnson returns. And I think that's really the best approach, right? I know people have mentioned that Chris is arguably worse than Woody, and a lot of that is based on the Adam Gase hire. But again, the argument I made then still stands true now. If Peyton were to call you up specifically and directly endorse this guy, I think you would pay strong attention to that. Outside of that, though, one of the final quotes that really stuck out to me from, according to them, an executive within a building, unless we drastically alter our culture and the way we do things from the top down, we have no chance. And this screams to me that they either seriously need Woody Johnson to take a step back and just see how things play out with the people that he hires to run the operation, or we need new ownership. It's pretty much that black and white here. But I walk away from this again really considering what is going to be the impact within the upcoming GM hiring cycle, and how this may alter the view on the New York Jets. It already wasn't one that was put in an extremely positive light. And now you have these reports that come out, and you'd have to imagine that Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas are going to be very busy this offseason taking calls and people digging for information, digging for the truth right away. So this was insane. I'll try to make sure I can include the article in the description for you guys as well. It was behind the paywall, but somehow I was able to see it on my phone. But let me know what you guys think. What's the impact? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.